Slight spoilers for the events in the One Piece anime and manga past the live action. Ever since Dragon Ball Evolution first graced the big screens all the way back in 2009, the term anime live action adaptation has always triggered a very vitriol reaction out of people, and rightfully so. Evolution was a gross misunderstanding of the much beloved Dragon Ball source material, so horrible that it brought the series creator out of retirement just to spite it. The Last Airbender turned one of the best TV shows of all time into quite possibly a genuine contender for the worst movie ever made. Ghost in the Shell stripped one of the most thought-provoking pieces of media ever and made it into a generic action movie with Scarlett Johansson for some reason. Death Note, my favorite anime of all time, got turned into the Death Note live action. No explanation needed there. And most egregious of all, Netflix's Cowboy Bebop. This one I have a more personal attachment to. For years and years I had been hearing inklings of news about the famed live-action Cowboy Bebop. Casting lists, concept art, design sketches, and trailers were all information that slowly got me hyped up for this release. I mean, come on, if any anime would work well in live action, it's gonna be Cowboy Bebop. How could they possibly mess this up?
Sounds to me like blackmail.
You're damn right it is, because Jet, you are black and you are male.
This one singular line destroyed all my hope of there ever being a good live action anime. So you can imagine my reaction when I finally forced myself to sit down and watch the live action adaptation of One Piece, only to find out that it's actually pretty good. One Piece is a series that I hold extremely close to my heart, with it being my first ever experience with anime. I went into the series completely blind, knowing absolutely nothing about it, and I mean nothing. I didn't even know any of the characters' names, like Luffy's. I didn't know about devil fruits, I didn't know that the series was about pirates, I didn't even know that the anime was based off a manga. Heck, I didn't even know what manga was at the time. I just saw it on Netflix one day and decided that it looked cool and put on the first episode. To this day, it is still one of the best decisions that I've ever made, because without it, I wouldn't have gotten into anime and started this channel in the first place. Not only that, but because One Piece is such an amazing series that takes you on a journey like no other. If you asked me what series I would choose to experience for the first time all over again, it wouldn't be Berserk, Chainsaw Man, JoJo's, Death Note, or any other series I've talked about on here before. It would be spending a whole year again, watching all 1,000 plus episodes of One Piece because of just how amazing of an experience it was. But the thing about One Piece is that it should not work in live action. Things like the larger-than-life battles, world-bending abilities, and the massive scope of the series all work very well in anime because it's well animated. Series like Cowboy Bebop and Death Note didn't have anything like this because they were both extremely grounded in reality and the perfect fit for a live-action Hollywood adaptation, yet none of them had worked. So how does One Piece, the most anime to ever anime, somehow translate well over to the big screen? Somehow, it just works. Starting with the acting. Manga is a purely visual medium, a medium that doesn't have anything like movement, sound, or music to back it up. So a mangaka has to convey something with nothing but words next to a black and white drawing. So how do they? Well, the creator of One Piece, Eiichiro Oda's solution is to exaggerate. Is your character feeling scared? Have them start crying and screaming at the top of their lungs. Is your character happy? Just put some stars in their eyes and have them do a funny little dance. Is your character feeling sad? Make them look super gloomy with blue shade over them and call it a day. Of course, none of this would ever work in live action because regular people don't act like this. So how do you faithfully adapt these characters if you can't use what makes them characters essentially? The answer is that you have to boil them down to the bare basic bones of the personality and let the actors take it from there. So Sanji can't have hearts bulging out of his eyes whenever he sees a woman, and Luffy can't gain 600 pounds whenever he eats too much. Instead, the actors have to use their, acting skills to convey this information, and for the most part, they nail it. Inaki Godoy plays our protagonist, Monkey D. Luffy, to near perfection, delivering every quip with a fun charisma that not only embodies Luffy's goofiness, but also makes him so endearing to watch and so easily to get attached to. Luffy's optimistic outlook on life, I feel, is strengthened by Godoy's acting, since whenever he's giving advice or pep talks, it really shows why Luffy is such a good pirate captain. Though I do wish Godoy had grounded his performance a little bit more during serious scenes, but that's really my only complaint. McKinney knocked it out of the park as Roronoa Zoro, with not only his portrayal, but his amazing stunt work and swordsmanship during some probably very challenging action scenes. though I do wish he would have maybe toned down the edginess and expressed Zoro's silly side a little bit more. Emily Rudd as Nami had one of the hardest tasks in portraying the most realistic character in the Straw Hat crew, while still having to feel like she fits in with them. Thankfully, she does that extremely well, showing just how important Nami is to her little found family. Rudd also does an excellent job at portraying Nami's depth as a character to the fullest in some incredibly emotional scenes when it was her time to shine. Jacob Romero Gibson as Usopp also had the hard task of fulfilling the role of the most emotive Straw Hat without the use of any silly anime faces, and he definitely lives up to the task. Gibson understands Usopp. He knows that most of his jokes aren't necessarily meant to be funny, but they end up being funny because Usopp is making them. Gibson embodies the cheesy side of Usopp to a T, and while he doesn't really have many emotional moments to shine, the few he does, he excels in. Also, a lot of people complain about Usopp not having his iconic nose, and I'm gonna be honest, I've always hated his nose, so thank you to whoever made that decision. Speaking of removing stuff, Taz Skylar had the challenge of portraying Sanji's womanizer elements without the exaggerated heart eyes or nosebleeds. So Skylar decided to portray Sanji as a smarmy ladies man, and it worked really well. He also answers the call when his acting requires him to get serious, especially when portraying Sanji's undying passion for food and his family. Where the main cast really shine though is when they're all on screen together, bouncing off each other and showing their chemistry just like the Straw Hat crew should. In terms of actors outside the main cast, everybody else was excellent, but I wanted to talk about a few standouts. Jeff Ward killed it as Buggy. I mean, sure, he went the basic silly evil Joker route, but he still stuck to his guns and sold it. Alexander Manitis turned Kuro from one of the most boring villains in the entire series to one of the most fun ones, by staying true to his character but exaggerating the best parts about him. It's weird to say that Stephen Ward played Mihawk, because it feels like he didn't. Instead, it feels more like the creators literally plucked Mihawk from the anime and just dropped him into the show, because Ward was the best possible actor they could find. Every single time he is on screen, he feels so powerful, just like Mihawk did in the original, and trust me, we'll talk about that introduction later. Vincent Reagan as Vice Admiral Monkey D. Garp had the task of successfully portraying his character during day-to-day life, which is something we've never seen in the anime or manga. That's due to the fact that the live action decided to introduce Garp much earlier than the source material did, meaning Reagan had very little to base his performance off of. Despite that, he played Garp amazingly and added a whole new layer to his character that I had never seen before. That being Garp's fear of him having to watch Luffy being executed like his friend Roger was. With this new layer, I'm excited for him to show us what he can do in Marineford. Speaking of changes, this was on everybody's list of concerns going into the live action. The concern that the people behind the live action might take some strange creative liberties and stray heavily from the source material for the worse. I'm very glad to report that this did not happen in the live action, and almost all the changes made are good ones in my opinion. The early introduction of Garp added a level of tension and an extra layer of depth to Luffy as a character. I also think that Kobe and Helmeppo staying prevalent helped to reinforce the idea that there are good and bad Marines, setting up the world government as antagonists in the future. Hopefully though, this is the last time we see them before the duo's reintroduction after Enies Lobby, which is such a cool moment later down the line, and I'm afraid that they ruin it if they keep reappearing. The exclusion of certain things such as the Gaimon arc and Don Krieg I feel were good changes as well. Gaimon as a whole was kind of weird, I don't even really know what to say about it, but I don't see how it could have really fit into the live action, so good call. Don Krieg was always one of the more forgettable One Piece villains, but I do feel that we could have stayed longer at the Baradier. I know that the creators really wanted to make Arlong feel like the big baddie this season, but I think cutting out the better half of the Baradier arc removes some of the attachment we have to Sanji as a character, especially for newer viewers, though I think with what little screen time Sanji had was still used efficiently. Some people were complaining about the absence of his heart eye bulge thing that I mentioned earlier, just like Usopp's nose, but I'm glad they removed it. Very rarely have I ever found this gag funny, and I actually think Sanji's emphasis on his so good they're bad pickup lines in the live action was a much needed improvement. For example, when he first meets Nami.
Apologies madam, I didn't see you there. Would you care for an aperitif to start? We have several rare Mercure vintages in stock, or perhaps you'd like a glass of umeshu. You know, something sweet for someone sweet.
Or when she gives everybody else a hug instead of him are moments that generally made me laugh. Though I wish they kept his hilarious Brooklyn accent from the 4Kids dub.
Hey, gorgeous! You remember me, right? Any chance you're free Friday?
Another change they thought worked well was the spliced up flashbacks. Instead of just throwing everything at you at once, the live action just slowly feeds you what's necessary. The last few changes that I wanted to talk about were the major ones to Nami's betrayal and the Arlong Park arc, as this is where I'm gonna have to get a bit negative. I hold the Arlong Park arc in very high regard, as I consider it not only the arc that got me hooked to One Piece, but the arc that made me an anime fan in general. The thing I really enjoyed about it was Nami's sudden betrayal of the Straw Hats and her reasoning for doing so. Sure, that is all still presented in the live action, but it just doesn't feel as, I don't know, natural. The slow reveal moments to all the Straw Hats, such as Nami stabbing Usopp, felt so much more impactful, and it kind of just sucks to have them taken out. Arlong as a villain also kind of felt a bit downgraded too. In the anime, he felt like this towering, unbeatable presence, our first real taste of how brutal the world of One Piece can be. He not only doesn't look the part in the live action, I just don't think his actor was given many chances to play his part well. Arlong was always kind of laid back and making jokes in the original because he knew that nobody could touch him. But that made him all the more terrifying when he would commit atrocities against innocent people so nonchalantly. While in the live action, he just kind of felt like a generic, angry, mustache-twirling bad guy whose motives rely on the fact that he hates humans for what they did to the fishmen. Remember, people whose first One Piece experience is the live action aren't going to have context for the world government mistreating the fishmen. So all they're going to see is Arlong as some one-dimensional villain whose justification for genocide is an event that they don't know about. Also, why'd they use some weird trap remix hip-hop song for his theme? Come on man, you're not Cell from Dragon Ball. Lastly, I know this is a bit of a nitpick, but come on, why didn't they include the walk to Arlong Park moment from the anime? It's one of the coolest moments in all of media, and I kid you not, this is the moment that convinced me to watch all of One Piece. But enough about the changes. Let's talk about the design, starting with the Straw Hats. At first I was a bit skeptical about the idea of the Straw Hats constantly changing outfits, especially if the outfits ended up looking too goofy or just straight up bad. Thankfully this is not the case, as all the outfits look sick. That's probably due to the fact that they're all based off of Oda's cover design pages. I actually like the outfit changing because it keeps everything fresh and it feels a little bit more realistic. Though this is probably the only time they'll ever be able to actually do this, since every arc going forward spans like 100 chapters, but only takes place over the course of a few hours. All the other character designs were extremely faithful as well, so I loved it. Another design choice that I'm super thankful for are the practical sets. I feel that in the past few years there has been an overuse of CGI backgrounds, or just CGI in general, in Hollywood productions. Like, why can't you just film at the location where the scene takes place? Instead they just plop every actor in the front of a green screen and tell them to pretend to be somewhere. The backgrounds don't even look good half the time either, because they're usually done by some overworked and underpaid VFX designer at the last minute. So I was ecstatic to hear when the One Piece live action was going to be using real practical sets. For once, the characters actually get to sit down and act, not staring at just some chroma key wall. These sets also help show newcomers just how detailed and intricate the world of One Piece is. It's almost overwhelming with how much detail all these places have, only just to be used for an episode or two. I really hope that they store these sets somewhere, because I would love to visit them one day in like a One Piece theme park or something. Plus it would just be a waste for them to tear all this hard work down. The last thing I want to talk about is the fights, starting with the CGI. This was probably everybody's main concern going into the series because, as I talked about earlier, CGI can be extremely hit or miss nowadays. The elephant in the room though was how Luffy's stretchy limbs would look, considering that he uses them every 30 seconds to fight in the anime. I am very happy to say that the CGI looks very good. While sure in the live action they made it where he rarely uses his stretchy limbs, maybe only like once or twice a fight as a finishing move, but in the moments that he does, look great. I really like how they replicated the rubbery parts of his limbs, like when his arms wobble after he makes an impact, or they just start flying in all directions when using Gum Gum Gatling. Sure, every once in a while they can look a little shoddy, like when he deflected the cannonball back at Garp, but everything else is pretty much solid. Even the CGI used in other places excels, such as Mihawk's introduction when he slices the entire boat in half. But enough of the CGI talk. Let's talk about the stunt work, and oh boy, is it amazing. I already talked about Mackenu's swordplay, but those same compliments could be extended to the entire cast as well. They could have easily used stunt doubles, but instead the crew went the extra mile in actually performing the fights. I also love the use of practical effects to represent the characters being sent flying after getting hit in classic anime fashion. Like when Luffy got punched by Garp so hard that he took out a wall and some props with him. One thing going forward with the live action is how exactly they're going to represent these super strong characters without making it look fake. And I feel that they did an amazing job so far. though I have no idea how they're going to pull off something like a Kaido or Katakuri fight in the future, but one step at a time. Before we go, I just wanted to list off some nitpicks that don't really deserve their own section, but I feel were kind of worth mentioning. First off, Shanks as a whole felt kinda dry compared to how he was in the original, and for some reason he always looked super disheveled. I also felt that putting him on the boat to rescue Luffy causes some confusion because most people think that he has a devil fruit now. The Surt Village arc dragged on far too long in my opinion, and is definitely the most boring part of this entire season. That's probably due to the fact that Surt Village is one of the worst arcs in the original series, but I don't think that it had to be 2 full-length episodes. Luffy actually hearing Nami's backstory, unlike the original, kinda defeats the idea that he was going to help her no matter what, just because she was his friend. I know it's kinda hard to do, especially the stunt work, but I feel that Zoro only using his 3 swords a few times in the series kinda just defeated the purpose of him having 3 swords in the first place. What was with this like weird shogi hat transition? It doesn't even line up with the hat. I kind of find it weird that you had to find a map in order to get to the Grand Line. You'd think it'd be super easy to find since the location is extremely important to the One Piece world. Like, majority of the countries that participate in the Reverie are in the Grand Line. Why the heck did you hire and publicly announce Monkey D. Dragon's actor, then only show his back? Why out of all the characters did you choose Smoker as the person to use as a end stinger? Maybe like Vivi or Crocodile, somebody more tied to Alabasta? What's the point of Ian McShane narrating the opening lines and then he just never shows up again?
A new age was born. The Great Pirate Era.
Why are so many scenes in the dark? It makes everything hard to see with absolutely no lighting. Whew. Okay, quick rant over. As I mentioned before, the One Piece live action is by far the best live action adaptation of a anime/manga, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for the series. Though it's looking promising because the show has reportedly been wildly successful, and a season 2 has already been confirmed. Thank you all for watching, I'll see you next time, have a good one.